Hello, friends. Welcome to yet another Average Folks in the Afterlife. Just another of my Word of God series. In this one, I'm reading from various books in my collection concerning psychic communications, astral projections, and automatic writing, where life in the other world, the other worlds, is described and sometimes rhapsodized about. One of the books we've read from regularly is Elsa Barker's Letters from the Light, originally published as Letters from a Living Dead Man, 1913, I believe. Still one of the best books going, despite the century that has gone by, giving many other writers much opportunity to compete. I still think this is one of the best. Letter 26. It would be hard for you to understand merely by my telling you, the difference between your life and ours. Begin with the difference in substance, not only the substance of our bodies, but the substance of natural objects which surround us. Do you start at the term natural objects as applied to the things of this world? You did not fancy, did you, that we had escaped nature? No one escapes nature, not even God. Nature is. Imagine that you had spent 60 or 70 years in a heavy earthly body, a body which insisted on growing fat and would get stiff-jointed and rheumatic, even going on strike occasionally to the extent of laying you up in bed for repairs of a more or less clumsy sort. Then fancy yourself suddenly exchanging this heavy body for a light and elastic form. Can you imagine it? I confess that it would have been difficult for me even a year or two ago. Clothed in this form, which is sufficiently radiant to light its own place when its light is not put out by the cruder light of the sun, fancy yourself moving from place to place, from person to person, from idea to idea. As time goes on, even the habit of demanding nourishment gradually wears off. We are no longer bothered by hunger and thirst, though I, for instance, still stay myself occasionally with a little nourishment, an infinitesimal amount compared with the beefsteak dinners which I used to eat. And we are no longer harassed by the 1,001 petty duties of earth. Out here we have more confidence in moods. Engagements are seldom made, that is, binding engagements. As a rule, though there are exceptions, desire is mutual. I want to see and commune with a friend at the same time when he feels a desire for my society, and we naturally drift together. The companionships here are very beautiful, but the solitudes are also full of charm. Since the first 2 or 3 months, I have not been lonesome. At first I felt like a fish out of water, of course. Nearly everyone does. Though there are exceptions in the case of very spiritual people who have no earthly ties or ambitions. I had so fought the idea of dying that my new state seemed to be the proof of my failure, and I used to wander about under the impression that I was going to waste much valuable time which could have been used to better advantage in the storm and stress of earthly living. Of course the teacher came to me, but he was too wise to carry me on his back from the first. He reminded me of a few principles which he had left me to apply, and gradually, as I got a hold of the applications, I got a hold of myself. Then also gradually the beauty and wonder of the new condition began to dawn on me, and I saw that instead of wasting time, I was really gaining tremendous experience which could be utilized later. I have talked with many people here, people of all stages of intellectual and moral growth, and I am sorry to say that the person who has a clear idea of the significance of life and its possibilities for development is about as rare here as on the earth. As I have said before, a man does not suddenly become all wise by changing the texture of his body. The vain man of earth is likely to be vain here, though in his next life the very law of reaction, if he has overdone vanity, may send him back as a modest or even bashful person, for a while at least, until the reaction has spent itself. In coming out, a man brings his character and characteristics with him. I have often been sorry for men who in life have been slaves of the business routine. Many of them cannot get away from it for a long time, and instead of enjoying themselves here, they go back and forth to and from the scenes of their old labours, working over and over some problem in tactics or finance, until they are almost as weary as when they died. As you know, there are teachers here. Few of them are of the stature of my own teacher, but there are many who make it their pleasure to help the souls of the newly arrived. They never leave a newcomer entirely to his own resources. Help is always offered, though it is not always accepted. In that case, it will be offered again and again, for those who give themselves to others do so without hope of reward or even acknowledgement. If I had set out to write a scientific treatise of the life on this side, I should have begun in quite a different way from this. In the first place, I should have postponed the labour about 10 years, until all my facts were pigeonholed and docketed. Then I should have begun at the beginning and dictated a book so dull that you would have fallen asleep over it. And I should have had to nudge you from time to time to pick up the pencil fallen from your somnolent hand. That is Elsa Barker, the amanuensis that is taking this down. Instead, I began to write soon after coming out, and these letters are really the letters of a traveller in a strange country. They record his impressions, often his mistakes, sometimes perhaps his provincial prejudices, but at least they are not the rehash of what someone else has said. I like your keeping my photograph on your mantle as you do. It helps me to come. There is a great power in a photograph. I have been drawing pictures for you lately on the canvas of dreams to show you the futility and vanity of certain things. Did you not know that we could do that? The power of the so-called dead to influence the living is immense, provided that the tie of sympathy has been made. I have taught you how to protect yourself against influences which you do not want, so do not be afraid. I will always stand guard to the extent of warning you if there is any threat of intrusion from this side. Already I have drawn a magic ring around you, which only the most advanced and powerful spirits could pass, even if they desired. That is, the teachers and I drew it together. You are doing our work just now and have a right to our protection. That the labourer is worthy of his hire is an axiom of both worlds. Only you yourself could now let down the bars for the inrush of irresponsible spiritual intelligences. And if you should inadvertently let down the bars, we should rush to put them up again. We have some authority out here. Yes, even so soon I can say that. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? An American in Heaven by a young chap called Gordon Finn. This is a novel, although it is heavily based on my own out-of-body experiences in various, what I would call, college towns on the astral plane, where teenagers and people in that sort of 18 to 22 bracket often go if they are suddenly whipped away from this life. Car accidents, drugs, alcohol, suicide, a number of things. Because it is such a longed for experience especially in North American youth. Whether it is in Europe, I'm not so sure, but I suspect it is. So this novel is, as I say, based on my own out-of-body experiences, although it formulates itself around the experiences of one 19-year-old teenage girl called Melanie, who passed in a car accident and is more than happy in heaven. In fact, feels a little guilty about it. She's so darn happy. And by the time we get to this part of the narrative in the middle, she's already established an ongoing relationship, as you know, ghosts coming to visit, with her friend Eric, who was driving the car and who suffered a spinal injury and is now in a wheelchair, and also with her parents and to some extent her not so much loved brothers. So she has a lot of interesting experiences in this novel, and I'd like to go into one of them, as I think it touches on many of the points we've been covering in this series, but from a slightly different angle. She has a guide, not so much a teacher, but someone who's been out in spirit longer than she has. Most teachers are of that nature. They're more guides with a little bit of experience and an interest in being helpful to newcomers. And her guide is called Sonia. Sonia had asked me a couple of times if I felt like religion would be something I'd be interested in. I said, nah, a couple of times. Not really sure of what I wanted, but not ready to take that kind of step. But I guess I had some kind of lingering something or other going, because I kept thinking about going and checking it out. Okay, let's call it curiosity. So I get to one of the churches. It's nicely set back with like lawns and gardens around it, a small empty parking lot. Funny thing about parking lots, we don't really need them here, but a lot of places have them. Little ones just for the memory, I think. People feel weird without them, maybe. There's another one next to it, also with great landscaping going on, both kind of traditional looking. Small, too, as if they weren't too hopeful about getting many visitors, but were still ready to hang out the flag. Anyway. Well, wouldn't you know it, I meet the pastor's wife coming out, but it's actually the pastor herself. Liz, she tells me to call her. Fine with me. How do you do? I'm Mel. I ask her if she gets many kids coming around. She says quite a few, some to try it out, some to settle in, some just to talk a bit. I tell her I'm probably only a talker, but she says that's no problem. She's got all the time in the world now. Turns out she was a minister's wife on earth, but died of cancer. The Lord took me for a reason, and I think this is it. She seems happy enough, so I guess she's adjusted and all. Like other church types I met on earth, she seems to feel that everything in her life and now death has a reason, that none of it just, happened. I guess I don't get that. Seems to me stuff just happens, and when people don't like what happened, they have to figure out some reason why the shit hit the fan, and when they figure out that reason, and sometimes it's God stuff, then they're happy about it, or adjusted, or something. I say shit happens and you deal with it the best you can. What about earthquakes and floods and stuff, I ask her. You think that's God's will? What with all those people dying like that? She gives the God works in mysterious ways argument, but with different words. More roundabout, like she's figuring it as she goes rather than reciting the party line, as my dad would say. We sit on a bench by a flower garden, and that seems so nice I forget what I want to say next. But she's cool with that, she just sits and waits. After her spiel, and me with nothing to say, you'd think she'd jump on me to make conversation at high speed. But no, she's just sitting there, cool and calm. The silence gets real comfortable for some reason. Well, there's birds chirping and a breeze on the trees and stuff, but it works out like silence. Kind of, you know. Something you can settle into. Eventually we agree that this world, whatever it is, heaven or nearly heaven, is so great, Liz says, sublime. Just kind of being is all you need. That leads us into wondering how and why. Liz thinks it's God's gift to us after a lifetime of challenge and suffering. Like a reward, I ask. Well, maybe, but maybe it's the next stage of growth, like evolution, like adapting and stuff. Liz says she was thinking more blossoming than adapting. She's not sure Darwin had all the answers. I ask if she thinks the church has all the answers. Maybe it's the way I ask, like I won't take any shit, but she looks pensive for a moment before answering. As far as she's concerned, Jesus has the answers, not the church. Churches, she goes on, are like repositories of questioning faith, because all true faith is questioning, and they should be available to all seekers to either practice their faith or air their doubts. I bring up Muhammad and Buddha. Liz says she can't speak for them, although she met some very nice Buddhists and Muslims when she was alive. Her husband initiated some interfaith dialogues in their community, and they were still ongoing when she passed. In fact, people of several faiths attended her funeral, and she could feel all their goodwill and prayers. She felt really blessed. I know what she means. The funeral vibe was really strong for me, nearly too much. What about wars and shit? Where do all those religious guys in the White House get off starting wars like they do? I mean, what's Christian about that? Liz comes on with the judge not that ye be not judged stuff, and says they must have known things they couldn't tell us. I tell her about my granny, the 70-year-old peace activist. No, wait a minute, she's 75. And what she would say to that. She laughs and says she must be a Democrat. I give her Gran's line. The Democrats are too stupid to be corrupt, and the Republicans are too stupid to be anything but corrupt. She laughs even harder and then tells me she prefers to stay out of politics altogether, as it only makes people angry with each other. I see that for what it is, one of those get me off the hook remarks, but I don't push her on it. Despite my feisty bitch pose, I've still got touches of, what do I know, I'm just a kid, in me. Then I asked if she's changed her religious views since dying. Yeah, is the answer. But she is still in the process, and if she is really honest with herself, her views were in a constant state of mutation on Earth too. Mutate always makes me think of viruses, but I stay with the program and ask which views exactly. She was never really sure that heaven was a place. Kind of figured it for a state of mind more than anything. Well, now she can see it is a place, although there's heavens and how this one relates, she's not sure. Plus, she's seen plenty of non-Christians here, so that kind of puts your faith to the test. She knows a lot of people who have a hard time with that when they get here, if they get here instead of somewhere else. Then she asks what views of mine changed. Interesting question, that. First off, I wonder what views I had exactly. All that gloomy goth girl stuff, it was more like abstaining from life than indulging in death. It was like being too cool to live. At least that's the way it looks now. I guess I thought death was something between an escape and a long sleep. Liz asks if I knew about the sleepers. I say no. Who are they? All the Christians who believe they would sleep till Judgment Day. They're all like in hospital type places, she says. Thousands of them, maybe more. She knows because she got the tour. Just like endless rows and wards with people sleeping and one or two folk keeping an eye on them in case anyone wakes up. Which, once in a while, someone does. Sounds kind of sad, I say. It is, she says. They could be having a life, a good life at that. I'd never really thought out my escape and long sleep options, I tell her. They were just ideas, notions, whatever. Like angels and harps and saints floating around seemed cracked, and nothingness seemed like such a waste. She asks me if I ever heard that Woody Allen joke about eternal nothingness being okay, just as long as you were dressed for it. I haven't, and it's weird, because Eric was a big Woody fan and had most of the videos. We did a pretty good version of that scene from Annie Hall with the lobsters loose in the kitchen. Liz says she doesn't know the movies well, but her husband Dan told her. and she thinks somebody told him. I ask if she still believes in Jesus. Why, of course she does. Why would dying change that? She looks genuinely puzzled. I ask if she's seen him around. Sure, she attended a service where he made an appearance. I imagine him stepping up to take a bow sometime after the sermon, and Liz says, "And here's the man you've all been waiting for." But no, it's a crock. She describes an open-air festival kind of service, with what sounds like thousands of people all looking up. And at a certain point, he appears floating away above everyone, smiling and raising his hand in greeting. The feeling that went through the crowd was amazing, absolutely blissful, a blessing you could feel massaging your heart. She was crying and hugging the person next to her. Many were on their knees with the adoration or praise in their eyes, and others were weeping uncontrollably and had to be helped away. And you know what? He looked different to everyone. Talking later, she encountered so many variations on the vision. Some saw Jesus, some saw a blinding light, some saw him surrounded by angels, others thought they recognized some of the disciples there and debated about which ones. Others were like shocked into silence and quickly left, as if they couldn't handle the intense emotions, which, she had to admit, verged on hysteria. I asked if he actually said anything. He spoke to our hearts, Mel. You had to be there. I'll let you know of his next visit if you like. Well, who could snub an invite like that? Makes a date with Bono look pretty tame. Of course, I said yes. How could I say anything else? Besides, it didn't look like a cult or anything. So we discussed this talking straight to your heart thing. It's like a direct communication without words. So that's like love, I said. Yeah, she said, but a very precise kind of love, like a well-aimed dart to your heart. I told her about the love I felt for Eric and how guilty I felt for being, this happy girl in heaven while he gets to struggle with being crippled every day. Liz said maybe he feels guilty for me being dead while he's still alive. I told her about meeting up with him when he was asleep and out of his body. She thought that was wonderful of me to be so dedicated to another's welfare, but wondered if it wouldn't be better for him in the long run if I was to pull away. That felt like leaving him stranded. No, I didn't think I could do that. I didn't mention the sex as I figured she'd disapprove. She was cool, but not that cool. I asked if she didn't go to visit her husband when he was sleeping. Well, he just slept, so there wasn't really much point, although she did pray for his health and happiness while she was in his bedroom. Then she started to sob a little, and I said I was sorry to have brought it up. Turns out he's not always in his bedroom. He's courting another woman and sometimes spends the weekend at her house. Of course, he needs a helpmate in his ministry, she knows that, but she can't help herself. She knows it's selfish, and she's prayed for strength to cope. So there I am, putting my arm around her shoulder, trying to comfort her. She's not as bad as my mum, so it's a bit easier that way. With my mum, I'm this useless ghost girl that can't do much. At least here, with both of us dead, we can relate. She comes around eventually and wants to show me around the church. It's just kind of a church, if you know what I mean. Nothing special that I could see. But I was polite and nodded and smiled at all the right places. My gran taught me that. She said if you nodded and smiled at all the right places, people would never know you were bored and you could escape all the faster. I have to say though, Liz was as nice a person as you could hope to meet, and I really hoped we could be friends and stuff. She said sure and gave me a hug that felt, real and not like she was just going through the motions to get me signed up for her religion. We sat down and discussed the relationship thing again. I brought it up, really, for myself at first, but then I saw it was more for her. She really needed to, vent about this other woman her husband was spending the odd weekend with. See, it was his old girlfriend before they got married, and she was something religious too, but a different, what do they say, denomination? She was mad at him for doing it, mad at her for, plotting the whole thing, and mad at herself for being mad, because it's not like the proper Christian thing to do. You're supposed to be forgiving and compassionate and stuff. There you go. A little section from An American in Heaven. As many of them are. As many of us are. Oh, we're starting to run out of time here. And I was going to read some more of the great Jürgen Zew's Multidimensional Man, of which we have dipped into many times. Here's a section called The Infinite Vistas of Paradise, which I don't know if we'll get through the whole thing, but we'll get through part of it. A gentle voice, which I at first mistook for a song, whispered into my ear and prized me from my contemplation. Look upon this playground of the mind. I dare you not to be seduced by it. In all your dreams you won't find greater amusement than this. This gentle voice was posing a question and was attempting by its very gentleness to demolish the world I had begun to admire so much for its sheer grandiosity. The imperfections of what I saw began to lose their power to seduce. I felt sorry for my fellow souls who were trapped in them, forever seeking comfort and identity. I could see clearly how passionately they would defend their positions, arguing their point of reality. They would even go to war for it. I studied their irreconcilable differences of frequency and character. Often their authority was taken only from their size, sometimes from the beauty of their design. It was clear that there could be no clear winner. All their passengers were attached to their systems rather than the reality of their own individual being. I felt a rush of wind, as if I were flying through the air at great speed, but I was not moving. I heard distant thunder. The world around me began to shift, and I wondered what other sights lay in store for me. The wind was actually a familiar voice whispering gently into my ear. I could not tell the words. It was a different language, not human, but somehow I had the impression of what it meant. It was announcing that I should prepare myself to visit the penultimate dream of all humanity. The thunder was accompanied by electrical activity around me. With a thrill, I felt the huge lotus flower underneath me growing rapidly, spreading out in every direction until it formed the shell of an enormous celestial structure, large enough to contain the whole universe. I had taken residency inside a grand cosmic temple. The walls were made out of liquid light, continually solidifying and transforming into new precious materials, beaming with ever-changing patterns. I could see at once where the architects of the great mosques on earth had received their inspiration from. In every direction there was an entrance or an exit, yet each tantalizingly close by. Through each gigantic portal I could glance into the vast vistas of different heavens, infinite landscapes lining the many avenues leading out through the gates. Each route out of this cathedral was a highway into another heaven, lined by magnificent arches as if to glorify the approach. The walls of this enormous edifice were cycling through precious materials, casting off energies in the forms of light and patterns of alternating complexities, like a giant exotic sea creature. The temple, if this word is at all appropriate, was alive and was illuminated by countless little orbs like myself. They sparkled in different colors and permutations of expression, some bright, some calm, some sedate, but each one individual. Some of them migrated joyfully through the vast gates to disappear into their heavens. On closer inspection, I saw that most of them were still attached to shapes which they had claimed for themselves in their own worlds, fascinated by their power and drawing strength from them. It were as if these thoughts they were still attached to, which would determine the nature of the heaven they would enter. It was clear to me that from each orb's point of view, they must have felt that they alone formed the center of this sheer endless place, and that their chosen heaven was the true destiny for every other person on earth. It was easy to see why, because each formed the center from which the cosmic lotus flower radiated out, and each formed the petal of the adjacent one so that the whole merged into an infinite tapestry. Humans find their identities here. They spin their webs of philosophies, religions, and beliefs. Some get caught in it like a fly in a spider's web. Some use it to spin their dreams and spend many lifetimes to unravel and fulfill them. The voice whispered to me. Well, we've used up our half an hour, but I can assure you we'll continue with this very segment of Multidimensional Man in the next episode. So until then, dear friends around the world, all peeking out from your ethnicities and political systems to what you might like to have as your afterlife, your eternity, I offer these segments of visions as directions to the map, that ever unfolding map of eternity. And in this time of troubles, by golly, we've got lots of them, I wish you all well. God bless.